Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Well, good morning, Melissa.
Good morning. How are you today? Happy Friday.
I'm doing great.
We are in the middle of our morning ritual and conversation, as we always do before these podcasts. It's always fun to riff a little bit on a topic and what we think is most pressing of the day. Mm-hmm. And I've really been noticing how people are becoming more and more fatigued with this stay-at-home order. And different people are responding to it very differently.
Totally. I've been noticing the same thing. Last week when I was talking to my team, I got to give like a company-wide, message every week. And I was talking about how when we first got the shelter in place stuff and everyone was working from home, it was kind of novel and everyone jumped into it. Right. And we're like, we're going to fight this thing and we're going to flatten the curve. And everyone's got a lot of energy and
bravado
and everything. Yep. And it's great, right? It got the whole thing kicked off. But now we're many, many weeks in and it's tiring. It's really emotionally difficult.
Yeah.
Our patterns that we had for years and years are upset. We're trying to work in different environments where our families, our kids, everything is, different, and it's emotionally wearing and difficult.
Yeah, and I was likening it in a conversation I had yesterday with someone. It's kind of like when you pile your whole family in the car and you're going to go on a vacation, and you're driving 10 hours. That the first 30 minutes of the trip is absolute hell and the last 30 minutes of the trip is absolute hell because something's going to change. There's going to be a change, right? Yep. And I really feel like from the perspective of self-awareness, you can't really even know how you're feeling. You can't even know if you're getting worn down unless you have some level of self-awareness. But what's super interesting to me is the more self-awareness you have, the more control, for lack of a better word, that you have in being able to change the experience that you're having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was thinking about the emotional drain that's been happening over the past couple weeks, it's like the change day to day isn't that much. So you don't really notice it, right? But that undercurrent just starts building and building and building until the point where like you're going to snap, right? It's going to be too much and you're going to break. And that breaking point is scary and difficult, but seems sometimes necessary part of the process. I'm not sure. It seems like a necessary part of my process. Maybe.
I noticed that subtle little tiny 2-letter word you added into that to change the whole message. No, I think this is super interesting though, JJ, because at the risk of sounding completely like a jerk and at the risk of sounding like I am completely unrealistic, I'm gonna just give a perspective that's pretty different than what you just said, because I think that both of our perspectives are right. Our feelings are never wrong, and our perspectives, each one of us and everyone else, it's your perspective is reality, as they always say. Mm-hmm. But during this whole thing, I have not felt like that. I think there's been probably 2 days where I had what I would call bad days. Like I had a couple of bad days. And I don't mean this in a sense like I'm bragging or I'm living under a rock, because I recognize there are things that are very upsetting. We're in a major upheaval, and I understand that. But my self-awareness is such where I know that the most important thing for me to do is stay in my centered space. The most important thing that I can do, not just for myself, but for everyone that I serve, is to stay sort of clean energy, so to speak, keeping a clean, centered space.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for me to do that, I make different decisions that I did even a few years ago.
So what does that look like? Like, what do you do?
Well, like in the conversation that you're talking about with your team, people are scared, but the more you talk about being scared, the more you are. And oftentimes people, and I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about it or anything else like that. I'm just saying, I just am very careful about where I'm putting my energy. And I have become a master of my own awareness, meaning that the minute something comes up for me now, I'm like on it. Whereas before, something would come up for me and I would try to pack stuff around it. For example, oh my gosh, I feel really anxious about this. This is a really stressful situation. I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to go talk to this person. And I created a lot of activities around it to try to make myself feel better. I tried to create a lot of other external activities to pretend to myself that I wasn't having these really deep feelings, which actually created more havoc. And the longer that I would put off recognizing and feeling those feelings, the more I put that off, the harder it got, the more anxious I became, and the bigger the explosion at the end to finally right myself to center.
Because there was such a buildup.
Yeah.
At the end, it was messy.
Yeah, like the big waves that we've talked about in past podcasts. It's like, then you're riding a tsunami wave because you're building it, every little thing. You're like, there's another thing, there's something else. And here this person's having a bad time and this person's having a bad time. And now this person is sick and this person. And I'm not minimizing that those things are real and tragic and scary. It has, in this conversation, I mean absolutely nothing about what's happening on the outside. It's all about what's happening on the inside. And having that awareness is not selfish. Having the awareness and acting in your own best interest, the moment that you notice something needs adjusting, is actually the best thing that you can do for yourself and for everyone else in the planet.
Yeah, because the opposite of that is acting in your own self-disinterest, right? It's actually, why would you not set yourself up for success? Why would you be setting yourself up for failure?
But don't you think that's what people do all the time? Like we do that all the time.
That's really interesting. I actually never really thought of it like that.
Like, I can't remember where I read this once, but it was just the most profound statement, and I've never forgotten it. And that is, stop using your imagination to create things that you don't want, first of all, which is what we do. We get something bad happens and we start to ruminate about it. And then whatever the reality is, what?
And then it does happen, right?
or sometimes, or we ruminate about it and we make it worse and worse and worse. And we add a bunch of stuff to it. I was talking to one of my clients and her company did a 20% reduction in leader pay. And she was in all out, complete and utter panic, which is understandable. However, we had a really interesting conversation because I said, well, what are you panicking about? Like, I know that's a really stupid question and I don't mean to sound like I'm not taking it seriously or being disrespectful, but can you tell me exactly what it is that you're panicking about? She said, yeah, I'm afraid that I can't pay my mortgage. I said, okay, how far out are you? She said, 2 months. I said, okay, what would happen if you couldn't pay your mortgage? Well, I would get bad credit. Okay, then what? I'd get kicked out of my house. Okay, Would that happen in 60 days? Well, no. All right. Well, then what would you do if you got kicked out of your house? Well, I could go live with my mom. She's got a really big house and I've done it before. But it was super interesting because as we unpacked what the actual fear was, we recognized that while the topic was real, you know, how she was processing that topic and adding to it and making herself more and more anxious about it was not being helpful for her.
Yeah. You know, I've experienced and noticed, like, when you have a really strong feeling and you don't really know why, it's really easy to backfill stories
Oh my gosh,
to make that feeling true.
Oh my gosh, it sure is. It sure is.
So it's really interesting when those undercurrents build and you don't notice, and all of a sudden you're sitting with a really strong anxiety and you're just looking around like, my logical brain better figure out why I've got such strong emotion right now. Let's start filling in a bunch of stories about why that could be true. Absolutely. When in reality, it's just an emotion that you need to just explore and unpack a little bit.
Yeah. Or you get to, and even just being with it a little bit, like, and like, right to your point. Yeah, we do. We like pack stuff around it. I was just noticing that a client of mine sent a Harvard Business Review article to me and said, this is exactly me. This is me. I'm so, I got a stomach ache the longer I read it, and it was called How to Refuel When You're Feeling Emotionally Drained. Mm-hmm. And I noticed, the very first thing that I noticed was, here we are again. Here's another example from a very reputable source that says, hey, you're going to get totally emotionally drained. You're going to get right to the end. You're going to get to the ragged end of your rope. And here's what you can do. And there's so many parts of that I completely disagree with. Again, I know that doesn't sound normal to what everybody's kind of feels.
Like but the emotionally, like the you don't like the idea that there's an article that says eventually you're going to be at this state, this emotionally drained state. Eventually you're going to break. So here's what you should do when it happens.
Yeah. Here's how to pick yourself up.
Right.
When you didn't want to pick yourself up or didn't realize you could pick yourself up before you were there.
You didn't need to get all the way there. You could have turned around partway into that journey, right?
Yeah. And it's just interesting, though, because, again, we spend a lot of time externally focused. You know, what should I be reading? What should I be doing? I feel scared. I feel anxious. What can I go do about it? I'm going to go do something. And actually that just is a lot of swirling energy that continues the momentum of the anxiety.
You're really taking away my go-to move, feel strong emotion, go jump into action. Now what am I going to do?
Well, I think
right here with these feelings. Ugh.
And I know, and again, like anyone who knows me will know that I am not a fluffy, touchy-feely, spend time in my emotions kind of person at all. So I'm not advocating that we all have to become that to become more self-aware and notice when we have feelings. What I'm simply saying is that we all have everything we need right now to become very self-aware. And the more self-aware we are, it's a little like, I think I was saying this to you earlier, it's like if you're walking a 10-mile trip into the mountains and you did a lot of work to prepare for it, and you get 10 minutes into the trip and you recognize that you are on the wrong path, like you completely took the wrong path for this 10-mile trek. And it's a bummer because you have to turn around and start over, but there's not much energy that's been wasted, a little time, a little energy. But if you have now gone 6 miles in to a path and then you recognize, oh my goodness, I am over halfway to the place and it's not the right path. I have to, then you're so much more invested and that trail is so much more grooved and it's so much more stressful and emotional. And yet you're having the same experience of walking and making a decision to be on a 10-mile hike.
Yeah.
So the amount of emotional investment that you have, if you notice earlier when you're on the wrong path, it's much easier to switch gears, to lessen the emotional response, to say, oh, something, I'm not feeling right now. Something doesn't, I don't feel right now. So what is the subject of my thought? Like, what is it that's got me kind of wound up, rather than, oh, I don't feel good, I'm going to get off the couch and just go run. I need to go do something. I'm going to go through the drive-through because that's still open.
I've been on many of both actual and emotional hikes that are going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, same.
And it is funny when you're halfway through. We were on an actual hike, and we were 2 hours in, and we realized like an hour in we were probably going the wrong way.
Oh.
And then 2 hours in, we're like, yeah, we are definitely going the wrong way. But it was funny how the pull to like, just maybe we're not, obviously our 4 hours of wrong way hiking later, we're back at our starting point, right? Like,
yeah. But isn't that funny? That's kind of natural.
Yeah, it's kind of natural to say, like, no, I'll just keep going. Let's just keep going, But because for some reason, admitting that you're wrong and going in the wrong direction is hard. Although once you do that, everything becomes way easier.
Oh, I love that. That's really interesting how you just said that. And what you just implied emotionally, which is very interesting, as you said, we don't want to admit that we're wrong, so we just keep going, and we pack stuff around that emotionally. We say, and how like if you want to use actual emotions, you might say, I'm feeling fearful about this. Something's scaring me. Something's making me anxious. Something's stressing me out. But I'm just going to keep going, even though that action that I did is what got me here. I'm going to keep going because it would just seem terrible for me to say, hey, you need to honor yourself. It doesn't feel right. So what would feel right? Yeah. What would feel right now? Don't make yourself wrong for feeling that something isn't right.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been conditioned to do. We have been conditioned to make ourselves wrong for our feelings and then look to everybody else to right size our feelings. That's how we've been conditioned. We've not been conditioned to stop and recognize, this feeling is funny. What is all that about? Oh, I'm going to switch that, or I'm going to do something different. That's not how we've been conditioned or trained. We've been conditioned and trained to say, oh, you're feeling this way? Well, no one else seems to be acting like that. So you just get yourself in line. Or, oh, you're really acting and feeling afraid. Yeah. Okay. You're like everybody else. So you should feel safe in the mass.
Yeah. Because everyone else feels the same way.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to get like a little deeper and serious here.
Yeah. Let's get serious.
Remember the movie Ghostbusters?
Yes.
Right, of course. So like in Ghostbusters, what happened? Like I can't remember actually if it was the first Ghostbusters or the second Ghostbusters, but which one was it where like all the slime was under New York City, and the more negative everyone got, the more the slime got all right, like all agitated, and was gonna like
right? I would feel like that would be 2 because you building off the premise.
That was 2 because the first one was like the Marshmallow Man,
yeah,
right?
That was
and the second one was like the emotionally reactive slime. That movie, I think, was really ahead of its time from a personal development, self-awareness perspective.
We ought to try and get some clips for our next podcast.
But if you think about it, right, like what that movie was kind of saying and representing was that if there's this big negative undercurrent in society, it just builds more negative energy, right, until possibly the entire New York City explodes or whatever gets covered in slime, whatever it's going to do.
Right. Yes. That's
But that is
exactly right.
interesting, right? And you talked about it earlier this morning about, those influences that we take in, that media we take in, all that affects our emotions and our anxiety, and that just builds and builds. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I like thinking about like the media you're consuming, the people's energy you are around has a big effect on your thinking, your energy, and your emotions.
Exactly. And not only does it have a big impact, but if you add to it by validation, by agreement, by plus wanting someone when they're going on and on about something that isn't positive, you are actually not just being affected by it, you are actually adding to it. You're adding
to the big slime mess that's in the sewer system. Yeah.
Hey, let's get some t-shirts. I think we should get t-shirts. But yeah,
a t-shirt that says Corona pandemic 2020, Ghostbusters predicted it, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
well, yeah. So, like, my favorite saying lately is that I'm not so much social distancing as I am social media distancing,
Yeah.
because just the media that I consume has a big effect on my emotion, and I
Mhm.
can't even watch the news. I
Yeah.
can't
I haven't
engage,
watched
and
the
I
news
don't
for weeks.
and I don't not engage because I don't want to know what's going on, and not because I don't care, and not because I want to ignore it,
No,
but I can't watch it because I need to protect my own energy.
precisely. And when you protect your own energy, like just take it a step even further. Here's the collective piece that is able to be affected by that. You protect your own energy, so it makes you feel better. When you feel better, you have a resonant tone about you. Your energy is very different than somebody who has been a media junkie, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell the anxiety and the nervousness, and people want to just spew data. They want to spew stuff that's scary and dark, and in the hopes of um, I don't even know whether they're trying to make themselves feel better, because I don't even think they recognize how unhappy they actually feel, or they don't realize how they can get out. So if you protect your own energy, what happens is you do not attract a lot of that spewing from people around you,
Mm-hmm.
and which makes you feel better, and you continue to feel stronger and better inside. You can still check on the news, you can still be present, you can still be a contributing member of society, but your whole energy is different. And when that energy is different, anybody that comes into contact with you feels that. And that is what you're giving to them.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're in leadership or in anybody that's in a level of influence, what you say and what you do, they have to match. That's the self-awareness journey, right? And you can tell the leaders that are social media junkies, because they'll talk about, well, this is what we're going to do to protect ourselves against blah, 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 blah. And it's like a firing squad, and we got this. And it's almost like a bravado. It's almost like a let's ride, war call.
Mm-hmm.
And it might make people on one part feel like, okay, yeah, okay, maybe this makes me feel safe, but it doesn't feel authentic. And so the people around don't actually feel safe when someone comes off that way. They feel a little more scared, and it brings up in them something that feels a little more anxiety driving.
Mm-hmm.
When you focus on making yourself feel good, whether it be avoiding social media, whether it be something as subtle as when somebody talks about how they're really, really angry with something, it could be something as subtle as you simply not buying into it with them, not listening to tons and tons of it, offering a counterbalancing opinion, sharing a more gentle, lighter approach to something. It shifts the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people are reading. People are reading energy. So taking care of yourself, there are huge payoffs for everyone when we focus on taking care of our own feelings first.
Yeah, I always thought, kind of doing things for myself, like, exercising and meditating and things like that. At first, I thought those were kind of selfish, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to go spend an hour exercising today. Well,
Yeah.
my wife, takes care of the kids or something. But, for both her and I, like if I'm not taking care of myself,
Right.
I'm no good to anybody else. Right.
Yes.
So like, I want to be in service of other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Me too.
To the best of my ability. And I can only do that if I'm taking care of myself.
And I think this stay-at-home order, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that this stay-at-home order is making all of those things that we know that. Yeah, we got to take care of ourselves first, yada, yada. But they're all coming home. Like, this stay-at-home order is making everything magnified. It's making everything much more truthful and instant response. I think it's magnifying everybody's true intents, and notice that you really notice things quickly.
Well, I'd say on that note, I hope that, everyone can start to like recognize this buildup of emotion that happens in all of us, and just kind of think about trying to recognize it early before it becomes an explosion.
Yeah. And certainly if you notice it a little bit, like, my hope for people would be that maybe this has created some awareness in them, and that they recognize that they don't have to feel guilty, or that they are actually not wrong for having these feelings that they're having. They're more right than they've ever been in their lives. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.